August networking dinner, and it's great to be amongst you all. It's been a little while since we last saw each other and other countries as well. So welcome to the Australian Arab Business Council. As you know, this is a networking dinner. We're here to have a bit of fun, to enjoy each other's company, but also on top of that, we're here to grow together, to network, and of course get a little bit of information along the process, a little bit of knowledge. And tonight we're joined here by Jack Kouzi. Big round of applause for Jack Kouzi in a small way over here. He'll be presenting us tonight about the economy and unmasking the economy. I would also like to acknowledge a couple of dignitaries that we have in the room, and that is Ihab Matar, Member of Parliament in Lebanon. Ahlan wa sahlan, it's great to see you. And of course to Jason Arash from the Canterbury Bankstown Chamber of Commerce. The reason why I acknowledge Jason is because when I go to his function, I'd like to be acknowledged in the same light as well. Can you do that for me, buddy? Okay. And if there's any other dignitaries inside the room, please do let us know, or reach out to me a bit after, and we'll pay you the proper respects. Now, these events, as you can see, it doesn't just happen on its own. We actually do have a full committee, which we're very honoured to be supported by. If I can have the committee members, the board members, just stand up quickly so we can see who we are, who you are, so we know who are responsible for the slides. Oh yeah, that's right. Round of applause. Yeah, Zafri. Yeah, that's the word. And then, of course, to our media partners, thank you for your coverage and ongoing support. And, of course, to the wonderful people from the Villa Blanca. Now, the Villa Blanca, they're the ones we can applaud for. And as I say, the more we applaud, the better the food tastes. So let's give them a big round of applause so that way we can get the proper Sahara. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome our President of the Australian Arab Business Council, Mr. Bobby Hamdan, to the stage to give his presidential address. Big round of applause for him as well.
Thank you, George, for a fantastic introduction. Thank you, members, guests, friends, family, everyone who shows up every meeting. We really appreciate your presence. The AABC would not be successful without your presence. Tonight, firstly, before I forget, I want to acknowledge again the Honourable Ihab Matar, who always embraces us with his presence, and Mr. Araj from Canterbury Council as well. Thank you always for your presence and support. This topic of economics is very close to my mind. I studied economics and commercial law, and whenever I hear the word economics and taxes, it triggers me to feel better. So tonight's presentation is very close to my heart, and who else but Jack Kouzi to give us an insight on what's happening economically. I think what we're going through today is exciting times. Yes, it is difficult times, but from an economics person, listening to you, Jack, I think I'll be really learning a lot, and later we'll have the opportunity to ask questions. But what we see today is quite challenging in terms of lower employment, higher interest rates, higher cost of living, high inflation. Really, we've not witnessed this in our lifetime. So it's very interesting to really shed light on it and see how Jack Kouzi untangled it and tell us about unmasking the Australian economy. This presentation is very important. People say economics and taxes are boring. To me, they're the most exciting subjects. So without further ado, Jack, thank you for presenting for us tonight. If you can join us and enlighten us about what's happening in the Australian economy. I will look forward to a very exciting presentation. And may I say, please give us some, peace and quiet, because these types of topics typically require attention. And really, I would like to benefit from this presentation as much as you guys. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jack Kouzi. Firstly, I'd like to thank you and the board for allowing me to address you here tonight. It's quite a privilege to address my fellow Arabs, and specifically my fellow Arabs in business. Before I get through the presentation, just a quick disclaimer. Anything I tell you today is my own personal opinion. You may agree or disagree with it, but that's the beauty of chambers of commerce. We can have a good debate and talk about the things that are occurring. When I was asked to speak here tonight, we were going to cover the US dollar, but George scuttled that, so you can blame him. But we looked at a general economic overview, And rather than do the global economic overview, which I've done for the last couple of years, I decided to keep it a little bit more bespoke and specific to Australia. So without further ado, my name is again Jack Kouzi, and I'm the Managing Director of the VFS Group. I've only got 20 to 25 minutes and I tend to babble, so I'll start my presentation straight away. In front of you right here are two sets of charts. So the first one is the RBA cash rate, and the second one is the Fed fund rate, so the US central bank. The US is still, the most important economy in the world, so we look at both of them. You can see a downward trend here, right? So we've had for the last decade, really interest rates coming off. Now what are interest rates? It's the price of money, right? It's what you borrow your money at, it's the price of money. Now whenever we have free money in the system, we normally have what we call an increase in the money supply. So in front of you are two charts of the M1 money supply, Reserve Bank of Australia and the Federal Reserve in the US. So whenever you have low interest rates, people can borrow at a low rate, you have the expansion of cash in the system, and M1 is defined as coins, banknotes, demand deposits, and M2 is described as anything that we can quickly convert into cash. So low interest rates, increase in money circulating through the economy. What does that create? It creates this young lady. Her name is Tina. Okay? She's a strapping young girl. She's out there to take on the global economy. And Tina has $50,000. Now, in the last decade preceding to 2022, Tina has three things that she can do with her $50,000. She can spend it, she can save it, or she can invest it. Now let's remove number one for a moment. Tina is left with two choices. Save it or invest it. Now from 2010 or 2012 to 2022, if Tina took her money to the bank, would she earn a good yield on her returns? No, she'd earn nothing, right? Up until 2021, you might have got 0.5, maybe 1, 1.5. So Tina's only option, really, to not get deteriorated by inflation, is to invest that money. See, Tina stands for there is no other alternative. And basically, if you summarize asset prices across the globe, over the last decade, there hasn't been any alternative. There's no point putting it in the bank because you earn nothing, therefore you need to invest that money. Now there are two sectors or two asset classes that you can invest your money in. Really. First one is stocks, and the second one is property. Right? That's where we put our money. Now there's no doubt that over the last decade, preceding 2022, there is a direct correlation between interest rates coming down, money supply increasing, and asset prices rising. There's no doubt about it. Yes, there are great assets around the world, and they generally go up over time, but the increase in asset prices is unlike we've seen in previous decades, and that's because money's cheap, money's free, it has to flow somewhere. In front of you are four charts. First one is the NASDAQ composite, top 100 companies listed in the US and their tech exchange, the ASX 200, the S&P 500, and the FTSE 100. Most global stock exchanges around the world look like this. Again, you have money in your pocket, you can't save it, or you don't want to save it because you earn nothing, you need to invest it. Two primary areas you invest it in are stocks and property. So most exchanges will look like this. Welcome to Sydney. It's a lovely place, isn't it? Great beaches, Bondi, Manly, Cronulla, great suburbs, Bankstown, Punchbowl, Kemba, all great suburbs. Sydney, a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment is worth more than a 17th century chateau with 7 bedrooms renovated on 7,500 square metres of parkland in the south of France. It's quite expensive. In fact, if you look at housing affordability in Australia, it's one of the most expensive in the world. We rank 2nd, 5th, 7th, 14th and 20th in terms of median multiple income. What that means is you take a house price, you divide it by the average income, and you get a multiple of it. We make up 25% of the most expensive cities on the globe, making us one of the most expensive housing markets in the world. You might be thinking, why not? It's a beautiful country, right? Stable government, fairly low in crime, lovely beaches and coastland, good healthcare, good education system. And you'd be right. However, if you look at our money supply, it's increased substantially. In November 2020, the Reserve Bank lowered interest rates to 0.1%, all-time low, ever in the history of Australia. So what did we Australians do? We went on a splurge. And what did we do? We splurged on our favourite asset class, property. We all know what happened. We upgraded our houses, we bought the rental because we were going to Airbnb it on the south coast or the north coast. We all remember that. We moved to regional areas because we were never going to come back to work, and work from home was going to be what we're going to do for decades. And we borrowed and leveraged on an already pricier market and made it even pricier. In fact, we borrowed like we've never borrowed in the history of modern Australian economies. Our property market was one of the hottest on the globe. Right? So in 2021, average property prices were up 24% nationally. If you go to regional, again you might be thinking, what's the problem? Prices are up by 24%, loan sizes are up by 20%, it's not a big deal. The problem is serviceability. Are we able to service the debt that we have consumed in this country? And generally we can. It's a very lucky country. It's got tight unemployment, it's got high wages, it's fairly open, and we have a lot of immigrants coming in that continue to grow our economy. But there are a couple of problems here. There could be big problems, there could be small problems. But serviceability is one of them. The first thing is, we were kind of caught unawares about interest rates. Now this is not to push on our Governor Philip Lowe, I think in one area where we definitely punch above our weight is debt. We are one of the highest indebted countries on the planet in the OECD world. In fact, our debt-to-income ratio is the highest in the developed world. For every dollar we earn in income, an average Australian owes $2. For every dollar we earn in income, an average Australian has $1.45 in mortgage loans on us. Our personal debt is staggering $46,000 per person, and we have the highest millennial debt of any OECD country in the world. We love leverage in this country. We truly do. What we know about history, ladies and gentlemen, is that every major economic crisis that we've had, bar a pandemic and bar a war, is usually a credit crisis. We give money and we lend money to people we don't necessarily care for. And we may be at this stage here in Australia. Now, the biggest problem we have is what we call rate vulnerability. And that's an inability to service this excessive debt. And remember, this debt ballooned in 2018, 2019, and 2020 as interest rates came down. Money was free. Let's put it somewhere. Is an inability to service debt due to sudden financial shocks. And you just have to watch the news to know that there are a lot of financial shocks in the world at the moment. Rising interest rates. Not only rising, but rising very quickly, and the velocity of the rise has been quite steep. Persistent inflation. Let me tell you something about inflation. If you have a choice between slow economic growth or inflation, you always take slow economic growth. Inflation or persistent inflation is like having a brain tumor. Slow economic growth, a big cut on your leg. It's a very big problem for economies. You look out through history, inflation can crush countries. We have high stubborn energy prices across the globe. One, because we have an ongoing war in Ukraine and Russia, but also because OPEC continues to lower their supplies, led by the Saudis and the Arabs. We have a lot of US uncertainty. You only have to look at the United States and think, is this the world superpower anymore? And then, which is particularly for us, is you have an extreme China slowdown. The last time we had anything like this in this economy was 2006, 7 and 8. And the Chinese saved us. They came in, they spent a lot of money, and they bought our properties. Not only that, China stimulated its country via printing a lot of money and building megacities that they have all around China. which used Australian iron ore, Australian steel, Australian copper, etc. Do not rely on China this time. In fact, China is suffering deflation possibly at this point in time. China is looking inward. It doesn't want an export-driven country anymore. It wants a consumption-based economy. Their exports and imports came out yesterday. They were quite awful, and our Aussie dollar collapsed on the back of it because we're not quite be exporting to China as much as we thought. Take a look at iron ore prices, or copper, or steel, and you will see a downward trajectory. So we can't rely on them. They're not going to save us this time, and they did the last time. Now, this is where we have a fairly unique leverage system compared to the rest of the world. When you go get a loan in the US and you buy a home, you tend to get a 30-year fixed rate. That's what you get, right? Most countries in the world have this or a similar system. We're very different. You might get a fixed rate for 2, 3, 4, or 5 years. In fact, if you look at the percentage of loans that were taken out during the 2020 boom, where we went out and leveraged up and bought everything, 93% of those loans are variable. The only country that comes close to us is Spain at 52%. So there's a lot of variable rate loans that were taken out in 2022 that now have a sudden increase in their serviceability in such a short period of time. The second one is what we call the fixed rate maturity cliff. Now, you've probably heard about this, it's been well spoken of. You will notice that the cliff started in about March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. And basically that is a bunch of loans that were fixed, 2%, 2.3, 2.4, that now will come on and become variable, 5.5, 6, 6.5, possibly 7, depending on where you are. Now remember, it takes a while for that to affect the economy. People usually save before they get to that variable rate. The only years that come close are 2002 to 2008, over a 6-year period, where interest rates increased by 58.5%. It's kind of uncharted territory for us, with excess debt in the system. Now, most economists have our peak cash rate at 4.35 or 4.6, and you can see those figures. I don't believe so. I think we're going well past 5, and I'll explain in a moment why. And I could be wrong, and it's only my opinion. But we're starting to see some alarm bells. This is mortgage delinquencies. If you don't know what mortgage delinquencies are, it's basically when you're behind on your repayment for more than 30 days. See the spike in non-banking loans? They're your mortgage societies, your second-tier lenders. Yes, much more riskier debt, but it's a very big increase. Banking loans are starting to increase in delinquency rates, and we still haven't seen the full impact of the variable or the fixed to the variable rate. But these ones are quite alarming. If you look at what we call prime RBS loans, or 30-day plus, these are ones done by our big central institutions. There's 3 lines that you should be looking at: the orange, the blue, and the red. The orange are any loans that were taken out in 2020, any loans in 2021 in blue, and 2022 in red. You can see the pressure, particularly in 2021 and 2022, of people that have taken out loans. $1 billion come off fixed to variable, and the repayments have been quite good. But you kind of got to give it time. However, it creates a bigger problem. The bigger problem is, just before I get to that, if you look at the highest variable rate, the lowest variable rate, I had a look at this morning. The lowest variable rate is at 5.44%. Now, most mortgage brokers would understand what I'm saying here, but when people get a loan, they have a household expenditure measure. To look this up, by the way. 2 more stretches in the interest rate start to put 40% of that leverage overshooting their monthly budget, right? And paying a higher servicing rate, let's spend less. And we're starting to see that. So consumer confidence is a good measure of the nature of the economy, and you can see that we're at generally a decade. Like, forget COVID, it's a 1 in 100 year thing, you kind of got to wipe that out. You can see where consumer confidence is, particularly in Australia. Now remember, we're an economy that's driven by the consumer. 65% of our GDP. Movies last week, no one in there. People are starting to tighten the belt. rightfully so. Interest rates are up by 121%. This is called the wealth effect. Now, this is an economic theory. Some people subscribe to it, some people don't. The wealth effect means is if your asset prices are going up, you feel wealthier. And when you feel wealthier, you spend more, right? Now, our biggest asset class here in Australia is property. In fact, roughly around 60% of our wealth is held in property. So when property is going up, you buy the Range Rover, right? You go on a holiday in the South Coast. Take your wife or your husband out to dinner. However, if your asset prices are starting to decrease, and we did see that last year, and you feel less inclined to spend, you might have the wealth effect in reverse. And we've benefited significantly from what I believe is an economic theory here in Australia. We are big spenders, Aussies. In fact, we're the third biggest spenders per capita GDP in the world. Only the Swiss and the United States spend more of their income than we do. And we're starting to see a reduction in what we call discretionary spending. Now, discretionary spending are things you don't need, but you can have. Non-discretionary items are things like milk, bread, shelter, and energy. But you can see we spend a lot on discretionary items. And it's that fulfilling effect. If consumption comes down, that we may go through that R word we're trying to avoid in terms of a recession. And like I said, we have the wealth effect. 60% of the household wealth in Australia is in property. And we love our property. And it's been fueled a lot by, yes, it's a great country, but a lot of it, I believe, is being fueled by free money. And when free money starts to run out, you might start to see the wealth effect in reverse. Here's the thing. And here's the issue. And I think anyone thinking that interest rates are going to come down at the end of this year, I think is very wishful thinking. Some people believe it will come down by the end of mid-next year, I should say. Again, in my opinion, that is wishful thinking. What we know about inflation is that it's quite persistent. Okay? If we look at history, think about it. When prices come up, it's very hard for them to come down, right? You know, people are easier to raise the prices, bringing them down. It's a general behavioural thing. And economics is the study of social science. But it's quite hard to get rid of. And what we're starting to see is inflation creep from food, petrol, energy, and goods to services inflation. Going to the movies, buying a train ticket, catching an Uber. You're starting to see that. But there are some bigger things that I think might affect us. On the left here is a recent quarter of how things have gone. Second component, which I think will contribute to stubborn inflation around the world, is energy prices aren't coming down. The chart in front of you is a chart of West Essex crude. Now, we are moving towards renewables, but oil is still a fundamental basis of our global economy. We still need it. We don't need it just for cars and planes. We need it for rubber and construction and all the other things that oil does. And oil has remained stubbornly high. And yes, we do have a war in Europe, but we also have a reduction in supply from OPEC. And we have nations moving towards renewable energies, not necessarily as fast as we want, therefore keeping the oil price high. We still need to buy it from somewhere. And this is where I think inflation will actually remain stubbornly high. So I was driving from work to my parents' house before I came here, across a few petrol stations. Petrol price was $2.20, $2.10, $2.23. Still quite high, even though oil's come down somewhat from that peak. You can see the sideways movement. Here, particularly, that's a big problem for us. One, because we import most of our oil. Two, we import it in US dollars, which means we're paying for it in Australian dollars. And if you've looked at the Australian dollar over time, it is quite weak. And if China continues to slow down, prejudice towards your creed, religion, or colour of skin. Second is housing shortages. So Janan about. Yes, there are housing shortages. I agree. Particularly in your major cities. But you will find, actually, there's plenty of houses outside of major cities, but we're not necessarily moving there. And they are two components that may propel our market. However, I'll skip this. This, I believe, is the next domino effect. And I think it's what's holding up our economy in particular. And I'll end on this. And that is employment. So at the moment, we still have very low levels of unemployment, which means that people can still continue to service the loan. You think about it. Two professionals both have two good jobs, earning good income. They can service the owner-occupied or maybe the investment property that they have. However, if employment starts to crack, I think you will start to see a domino effect. And that's really what's really holding us up at the moment. And we are starting to see some cracks. So there is a massive amount of underemployed, and these are people who want more hours but can't necessarily get it, which isn't reported in the headline rate. And the second one is a lot of people left the workforce during COVID and never returned. They're not necessarily incumbent in that unemployment rate. We've seen a few of these headlines, but our big banks, Commonwealth Bank, who reported a $10 billion profit today, we're starting to see redundancies come through. And these are the ones that we only know of. You then combine artificial intelligence and the replacement of jobs, not as big as we think they will be, but that will happen over time. And that could be the last domino to fall. And I can tell you this with surety. If we go to 8 or 9% unemployment, you will see this market fall over. That I can tell you. If we can maintain employment at 3 to 4%, we should be okay. But if we go to 7 or 8 or 9% unemployment, I know it's a long way away, that will see serious cracks in our housing market. And a housing market that's been very, very resilient for 50 years. And you'd be a fool to back against Australian property. I understand that. But if this domino starts to fall, I think we might be in a little bit of trouble. Now, just finally, before I finish up. Remember Tina? Okay? Now Tina, from 2011 to 2022, she had no choice. Okay? She had to invest her money. Tina's got a choice now, right? This is why I think asset prices aren't going to rise as quickly. Tina had stocks of property, and she now has a choice by deposit rates. It's the first time in a decade where you can go to your bank and get a yield. Right? You didn't have this before. So the investor, or the person with the money, now is faced with, I can put it in the bank and take no risk and get 5 or 4.9 or 4.25. Or I can put it in asset classes which carry risk. Stock prices could come down, property could move back. They didn't have that anymore. So your opportunity cost is a lot less, which means that money floating around in the economy actually has another place to go now, which we have not experienced in the last decade. Again, to build towards those theses. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jack, and a big round of applause for Jack Kouzi for that wonderful presentation, including the conclusion there. Now, if anyone has any questions for Jack, and please bear with us for a moment, please do raise your hand. I'll walk across the room, I'll point to you, Jack will do the answers, and then we'll take it from there. So, over to you, Jack, and I'll get your first question ready.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's all right. I'm happy to always give my opinion. I'm wrong all the time. I think we're going, the high fours. Maybe not this year. I mean, I think they should go to high fours this year. If I was them, I would go to high fours this year. And let me give, because you've got inflation, you don't play with inflation. It's not like playing a game. I'll take you an example. Brazil has zero inflation at the moment. Now, the Latin Americans, they've got experience with inflation. They know how to deal with inflation, to deal with it. They went to 12% interest rates, boom, straight away. Okay? And yes, it's a different recovery, I know that. But things aren't getting cheaper. And yes, you can hear the core inflation, but I think we should go to the high fours. And to be honest with you, in my opinion, we should have raised in the last time. But they're concerned, obviously people are concerned. But I give you the analogy. If you're sick, would you rather chop off your leg? Bad analogy. Or would you rather brain damage? And inflation is brain damage. You can really kill the economy. Because if you affect price, you kill the consumer.
I understand inflation is a concern to the banks, which further condenses the economy and spending and the flow into the economy.
Which should bring down inflation.
Which should bring down inflation, but also slow down the economy.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Which then can also have the effect of bringing us into recession.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
are we damned if we do or damned if we don't?
We are. Yeah, we are. I mean, look, I think we'll look back at this period again. I don't want to be critical of people that are much smarter than me, but we kind of avoided recession for so long. Like central banks around the world avoided recessions for decades. You know, suddenly recession became a really bad word. We didn't want to have it. Recessions are just part of normal economic cycles. You know, they're actually natural and they're healthy. Asset prices come back, gives every time to reset, and we go again. But, you know, after the financial crisis, we seem to be hell-bent on avoiding recessions no matter what. And the only lever we have are interest rates. And I think we will come back and look down on this period and say, and I think we're already learning these lessons, that zero interest rates or really cheap interest rates, they're not. They're not. So yeah, to them, we do. And don't forget, we're affected by the rest of the world. So if the US raises rates quicker than us, there's an interest rate differential. That means money flows out of Australia, goes to the US because it earns a better rate. That therefore decreases the Australian dollar because you've got to sell Aussie, providing less, which makes our exports more expensive, which is inflationary. So I mean, it's not A and B, but yes, then if you do then.
What's the way to control the dollar? I feel that we are
Yeah, you can. I mean, the central bank might intervene from time. I don't think they've intervened for a decade, but you're talking about such liquid markets, it's very hard to make a deal. Very hard. You can affect the dollar via rates, via that differential, but you're talking about very deep liquid markets now.
I've been in this country from 1970. From then until now, more than 7 times the interest rate goes up.
Yeah.
And the value of the houses goes up as well. I used to remember in my days, brick house, 3 bedroom, $11,000. The good one, $14,000. The Fairburn one, timber, $8,000.
Correct.
Now look, millions now.
Correct.
I feel sorry for the new generation.
You're right. And like I said, you're a very brave man back against Australian property. Not what I'm saying, but every major economy in the world is at a property crisis, considering all the factors that we have.
Last question to Gus.
Gus, over to you.
I'll just have that in mind. Great presentation as always. I've just sold a business that I've operated for over 2 years. 15, 18 staff, makes $7 million turnover. Medium-sized business. Currently you see, I know the challenges I went through. From staffing to increasing cost,
good staff is very difficult considering we haven't had immigration for a long time. Wages are very high. I mean, we have very high wages. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing, but you know, we just raised the minimum wage by 5.7%. It's very inflationary. You know, we could talk about the commercial property crisis that is in front of us right now. I mean, in the US, we're starting to see a lot of defaults. I mean, there's a wall of worries, and we've had the wall of worries, but we've never had a pandemic, a shutdown of the global economy, and then this massive influx of money that was pumped into the system. We've never done that. So we're rewriting the playbook. Look, I think the biggest weight on everybody's going to be rates. And remember, rates is the price of money. Rates go up, your money costs you more. And that is going to affect us. We're in uncharted territory, no doubt about it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Excellent. So that concludes the first half of this evening. We'll take a short break so we can serve the mains. We actually do have the Lucky Door Prize up for grabs. We've got a lovely handmade basket straight from the Middle East to the Arab Business Council team here tonight, donated by Handy Kouzi. Was Handy Kouzi on table? Whoops. In new condition, still in mint condition, donated by Handy Kouzi on table 5. Thank you, Handy. And we also do have a lovely box of chocolates donated by Hugo's Chocolates in Villawood, and I understand that might become a member very soon, so thank you very much to those guys. So please do put your cards inside the bowl, and we'll see you in roughly half an hour to do general business. Thank you, everybody.